Hi, welcome back to another episode or tutorial with myself, Angela McCall. So if you haven't been here before, I've been following the actual tutorials that Solar2d provide on their Getting Started series on their website for those that are learning to code. So I'm actually kind of doing a walkthrough of all of them, and this video is now part C of the last chapter, which is deployment, building and deploying your app to the app stores. Now I've thrown this in as an extra because I think there is a lot of things that you guys need to do that would save yourself a lot of problems if you understood some of the process. And I had to learn this the hard way through trial and error and many sort of days and nights of frustration when I first got started. So I kind of wished my version of this video existed then for me to follow. So this is why I've created it today. So we're jumping over to the left hand side screen. You can see we're on the chapter 8 deployment, and we're pretty much now down to this section here, build and publishing. So I'm going to go through this in more detail on the following videos, but today we're dealing with the pre-preparations that are needed. So the first thing that I want to talk to you about, so when you fire up the app for the first time, you will see there that the Solar2d, now it came up very quickly, there you go, you can see it, Solar2d splash screen arrived. So let me just do that one more time so that you can see it. So basically the Solar2d splash screen appears before the app loads. Okay, now we can get rid of that. So some of the things that I like to do, let me actually bring up a list first of all on the screen for you. Okay, so down in the bottom right hand corner here, this is what we're going to be covering. So the first thing we're going to do is get rid of that Solar2d splash screen. If you want to keep it in, there is nothing stopping you deploying and building your app and sending it to the app stores with that. It just means that when your users go to download the app and they start to use it, as you just basically saw, even though that was done on a live build, it essentially just shows that Solar2d logo for about 2 seconds before it kicks in to the app itself. So to get rid of that, we are going to look at how to do that right now. If we go back to our tutorial notes here and we go up to the guides section, plugins. Okay, one of the things that we can do here is we can install an external plugin that's already been built and provided to us. So I've scrolled right down to the bottom where it says utilities, and I'm going to the splash screen control page, and this basically talks us through it. So there are basically 2 steps to installing this plugin. The first is inside the build settings file, which we're going to go to in just a second. We have to install this piece of code here. It's actually the settings, the splash screen equals open curly bracket enable false. Okay, and the second is actually then to turn off the plugin in the settings themselves. So we're going to do this in 2 different ways. So let's start off by removing the splash screen that way. So I'm just going to copy this code. Okay, I'm going to go back to, let me minimize that, there's our studio, Visual Studio, where's my build settings? Okay, so you can see in here, there's my settings, and then we've got a list of parameters. The first level of parameters is orientation, Android, iPhone, there's a plugin section, and then there are exclude files. Okay, so I'm going to just drop this code right here. Now where it's got the little dashes beforehand, just like comments in normal files in Lua, that's a comment section. So if you look carefully, it's just literally a table array like we've worked with before, but it's open, it's like nesting tables within tables. So at this first level, we've got a curly bracket and a closed curly bracket followed by a comma. That's basically saying that one table for iPhone exists. And now we've got the same thing going on here for a table called splash screen. So we've just added in this one parameter called enable, and it's set to false. Okay, so we're going to save that, but we've got still more work to do before we can continue. Okay, so going back to here, we now need to get the plugin itself. So if you click on the plugins, there is a free plugins directory. And as you can see, there are loads and loads and loads of plugins. All of this has been donated and they're freely available by developers that want to contribute to the Solar2d open source platform. So I definitely suggest going and checking this out. There's probably things in here that you've never even imagined, or if there's a problem that you're coming up against, chances are somebody's already designed a solution, and it's just an external library. So a bit like we require in the composer screen, or we require in a widget screen, or whatever, our own modules even, we basically can download and save the files into our environment and require them in as an external library that somebody else has already written for us. But instead of going through all of that one by one, we're going to start by typing the word splash. Okay, and as you can see, I've only got part way through, but it has basically found this result. Clicking on it tells us what to do. Okay, so please add this plugin using the following code to the build settings, so back into that build settings file. And again, if you look, there is the curly brackets. It's basically another parameter at the same level of the code as the splash screen and the iPhone. So let me just come out of there right now and we just literally minimize this screen. Okay, so in here, I'm just gonna move on down, and at the same level, we've now got the plugins. And I think where I was playing before, I just moved things around, but that is essentially how you would see your code. Let me just make it a little bit larger for you so you can see it on screen here. So we've got the plugins notation or comments. Then we've got the first table, which is defined by the open bracket and the curly bracket closing it. And then in there, we've got a parameter in square brackets whose information or parameters are set to publisher ID is com.coronalabs, which is their original name. And then obviously underneath it, at that same level as plugins, we've got the splash screen. So now that those two bits of code exist, okay, what you could do is you could now save everything, okay, and then you could deploy it to your test environment and do it on your Kindle. So I've already done that. So I had two versions going so I could show you the before and after. And if I show you now, literally it goes straight into the app. There we go. Let me just do that again because I think I was a bit quick for the old Kindle here, but there we go. You can see that it goes straight in and there is now no Solar2d splash screen. So I now know that we've successfully removed it, and that's the first job that we've got done. So I'm just gonna quickly tidy that up, save and close, and we are all good again. Okay, so that's our list of files. Now, if we remove myself up to the other corner, you can see that the next one here is print commands. Well, that's really easy. Wherever you found a print command that you've done, for example, and you've wanted to leave yourself instructions to come up onto the console here when you was designing and developing, I basically go through every single file and I basically delete them. Okay, so that's all I do. The reason for that is because I have had apps declined at the App Store in the past because of too many print commands. So I've just added that. I've created like my own to-do list or a checklist that I now work through as part of my preparation process every time I release an app, because there's only so much information I can retain in my head, and guaranteed something that I've done before in the past will trip me up again in the future if I don't make this list. So I'm a big fan of lists. The next thing that I do is I remove my comments. So again, any comments like this, whether it's sort of instructions to myself or notes to myself, I generally remove them and tidy up my file as well, which is really good. And then I remove any unwanted files as well. So for example, that scene template, we don't need it. It was there as part of our initial learning curve when we was working through the tutorials. I always drop it, or my version of it, into my apps at the start of the build process, or the designing process, should I say, but then I delete it as well. So we don't need that file, so that file has gone. Let me save and close that. So that's all good. So that's my unwanted files. This is where things get a little bit funky. When you want to deploy to the Apple stores, you have to do so on a Mac, and when you want to deploy to Google or Amazon, you can do so through a PC environment. I believe you can also do that on a Mac, but I've never tried. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to just check that the PC environment that I'm working with is set up correctly to basically build my app, because I had huge headaches with this when I first got started. Now, I am going to give credit where credit is due. Okay, these first 2 challenges took me like a good week and a half to figure out, researching the internet, reading forums, and then I found a couple of YouTube videos that basically solved most of this problem. And once I've done it and I've set it up on my PC, I've never had to do this again. So if you are struggling, first of all, the easiest thing to do, and you're on a PC environment, make sure you've got the latest version of Solar2d. So the easiest way to do that is to come back over to your app, file, close the project. Let me just bring this onto the screen properly, and up here you will have about the simulator and it will tell you the version. So I'm doing this in November 2023, so the latest version is 2023 3699. Obviously that could change, and at any time you can go to the Solar2d website, go to downloads, and then check. So I can see there that I'm on the latest version. Okay, and then I would do that process as well on the Mac, on my MacBook Pro, before I was to deploy to the Apple Store. So I make sure that I'm always running the latest version of Solar2d. So that's an easy check. If you're not, download it, reinstall it, Bob's your uncle. Okay, so that one's nice and simple. Now, coming back to this Java key tool and app signing tool. In full transparency, I've surfed to these videos and I need to give full credit right now to, and I can never say it, I think it's like an Italian name, but I've actually chatted with the guy a couple of times, FOLIAGOS Game Studio. So if I pronounced that wrong and you are watching that, I'm truly sorry. But when you have installed your Java SDK kit, one of the things it needs to use is a key tool, and it doesn't naturally exist. So sometimes you have to build it. Now this video is only 1.5 minutes long, and there is no talking in it. He literally just screen records, and this chap takes you through all of the different things that you need to do to install your key tool on your computer environment. If you've never dived into the operating system on your computer before, it could feel a little bit overwhelming. Just take your time and follow this process really slowly, because without this key tool, the build process generally fails and it is an absolute headache. The second thing he's gone to do is that he's actually provided the Android app bundle signing process. Again, we're going to follow that in the next video. Once you've done this 2 or 3 times, you generally won't need to use this video, but the video again is by the same chap, FOLIAGOS Game Studios. Again, apologies if I've got that wrong, it's my best attempt. I think it's Italian, but again, he's made this video whereby he explains what the key store is, how it works, how to save it, how to create your own, and again, walks you through the process and using some of his own notes and things like that as well. So we will cover that in more detail in the next video, but I just wanted to let you guys know that right now. The only thing I think I haven't actually listed on there was the Java JDK software, which is used during the Apple signing process. So Solar2d doesn't actually need to use Java Development Kit, but the actual signing of your APK files for the Android environment does use that software, so you need to just make sure that's installed as well. What I am going to do is I'm just going to very quickly talk to you about the MacBook operating system and my checks for doing updates and making sure my Mac environment is fine. Okay, so just to make sure that my MacBook, I don't necessarily need to walk you through it, it's just basically making sure that the files, the software itself is up to date. So for my MacBook, okay, again, Solar2d, I've just shown you how to do that, but to challenges I've had, Apple are just challenging, full stop. I've actually had apps not deploy or build properly because my Mac operating system hasn't been the correct or the latest version. So before I start anything, I always make sure Solar2d is up to date, and I always make sure that my Mac operating system is the latest one. XCode is the Mac's environment version of Visual Studio. So before I do anything, I make sure XCode itself is also up to date. And then last of all, when you deploy to the Apple Store, and you'll see this in the Apple video that I do in due course, but you can't just download, or you can't just build the file, save it on your local computer and then do an upload in the Apple Store. You have to use a tool to get your files from your computer to the Apple environment, and they use a transporter tool to do so. And when you're building your app, that transporter also has to have the latest version. You also need to make sure that you're logged in, obviously, to your Mac store. Here's another tip for you as well. Your computer that you're signed into and your MacBook that you're signing into, when you're signed into the Mac store and your Apple store, need to have the same login. So for example, when I first did this, and I'll go into this a lot more detail, I have 2 Apple users. So years and years ago, when I first got an iPhone, long before I even developed anything, I created a regular Apple account just so that I could download apps on my iPhone, and I did so using my Gmail email address. Never thought anything of it, but when you become a developer, if your developer email for your account is different to what you're signed into on your MacBook, so one was my Gmail and one was my business email, the two don't talk and they can't, and I couldn't get anything to deploy, and I just couldn't figure it out why. So when I say Apple can be a bit of a headache, try and make yourself a checklist of all the things that you need to do, because you will probably spend a wee while learning this process, and just make sure that you're signed in on everything using the same developer Apple passwords and email addresses as well. But other than that, it's just literally a case of making sure everything that you do is using the latest software. And that is my preparation process. So I have just a checklist. I'm actually thinking of using a Trello board at some point so I can just work my way through it. But that's pretty much everything that you need to do for getting yourself sorted, ready to start the build and deployment processes. If you've enjoyed this video, please be sweet, click the button, and I'll see you on another one real soon. Bye!